What happened to the Todd Blanche who was a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York? What happened to the prosecutor people had respect for? What happened to the prosecutor who once respected the rule of law? What happened to the prosecutor who said that there wouldn't be a whiff of political partisanship and then prosecutes the president's enemies over seashells cases, over making a video stating the plain law and Constitution? You basically decided that you were going to be the lawyer for the president and the lawyer for the IRS and the Justice Department. As the court found in this case, there was no adversarial relationship. The court found it was a sham. Mr. Blanche, you represented the president in at least three criminal cases: the hush money payment case in New York, the January 6th case, and the Mar-a-Lago classified documents case. You said when you appeared last before this committee, you would consult with ethics lawyers about that apparent conflict of interest in handling any case involving the president, having been his personal counsel. Did you consult with Joseph Terrell, a senior ethics lawyer at the department?
I believe I met with Mr. Terrell, yes.
Did Mr. Terrell tell you that ethics laws and policies required that you not be involved in cases involving your prior representation of the president?
Yes.
So in those three matters, the hush money payment case, January 6th case, Mar-a-Lago case, you were to recuse yourself.
I'm recused, correct.
Before senators even walked into today's hearing, Todd Blanche's nomination was already under bipartisan pressure. Democrats questioned whether his years as President Trump's personal attorney created unavoidable conflicts of interest, while Republicans focused on a completely different issue, a controversial Justice Department settlement involving Trump that has continued to raise legal concerns. So when Senator Schiff pressed Blanche about recusal, he wasn't asking an isolated question. He was opening a debate that had already been building across Washington for weeks.
Well, by the way, the cases are not ongoing, Senator, but to the extent there's any work around those cases, yes, I'm recused.
So you said to CPAC a couple months ago, the other things that are happening, there is not a single man or woman at the Department of Justice who had anything to do with those prosecutions, meaning the prosecution of the president. So you're saying that it's not a conflict of interest for you to be involved in the firing of prosecutors who prosecuted your client, your former client? There's no conflict there? Is that
no, there is. I wasn't involved.
So
that would be a
at
conflict.
CPAC, you're taking credit for the firing of these Department of Justice lawyers, but you're not willing to take responsibility before this committee. Is that the case?
No.
Okay.
I'm making, there's a
you
statement I gave
you
at
were
CPAC.
bragging about this at CPAC, the firing of these prosecutors, the firing of the FBI agents, the getting rid of everyone who investigated your client. You were proud of that, speaking for the Department of Justice, but you don't think that's a conflict of interest. You moved to vacate, I don't think you're going to deny involvement in this, you moved to vacate the convictions of 12 Proud Boys and Oath Keepers, which erased their convictions, restored their gun rights. These people were convicted in the January 6th investigation, which also involved the president, who you represented. You were involved in dismissing those cases, were you not?
I'm the acting attorney general, so yes, my department moved to dismiss. I was not involved.
So you didn't recuse yourself from that matter. You were
No.
willing.
There's no reason to, from the Proud Boys matter?
Yes,
I mean,
it was.
lawyer,
it
you know
was,
the rules.
It
There are
was
rules that say when I
yes,
have to
there
be
are
recused,
rules,
and that's not one of them.
and there are rules. And when you're told to recuse yourself from investigations
I
that
always
you
do.
handle for the president, you're supposed to recuse yourself.
No, when
So
I represented the president.
you have also said, you've also refused to release Volume 2 of the Special Counsel's report. That was an investigation into the Mar-a-Lago documents case. How is that not an abundant conflict of interest? Refusing to release to the public an investigative report of an investigation into your client.
I am not a judge. A federal judge.
No.
The
The department's position under you, Mr. Blanche, was do not release the report.
So that position.
If you went into court asking them to release it, it would be released by now. So how is that not a patent conflict of interest?
Now here's what viewers didn't hear during that exchange. Just days before today's confirmation hearing, a federal judge sharply criticized the legal settlement tied to President Trump's IRS lawsuit, describing major parts of the agreement as improper and triggering new scrutiny of the Justice Department's handling of the case. That ruling immediately changed the political environment surrounding Blanche's confirmation, because senators were no longer debating a hypothetical controversy. They were questioning decisions that had already drawn criticism from the federal judiciary.
What you're saying happens to not be true. I did not do that. What you're talking about happened before I became the Deputy Attorney General.
So you support the release of Volume 2?
No, I don't, but I'm recused and had nothing to do with that case. Like, you can't accuse me of violating my ethical rules and then lie about what I did.
So you had nothing to do with the decision to prohibit the release of the report? You had nothing to do with the department's position?
I wasn't in court.
No, I'm not asking whether you were in court. I'm asking you whether anyone sought your opinion or used your guidance in refusing to release Volume 2.
When
You're saying you had nothing to do with that decision?
Litigation was ongoing, I was a private citizen, still representing the President of the United States. It was before March. Since March, to the extent there's been anything in front of that judge,
Mr. Blanche,
I haven't been part of it.
I asked you in your last confirmation hearing whether you would release the report, and your answer was no. Your answer was not, I will recuse myself. Your answer was, no, I will not release the report. That was your testimony last before this committee. You subsequently were advised by ethics lawyers not to be involved in these matters, but it appears you were involved in these matters. Let me ask you about another matter.
I wasn't involved. You can't say it appears I was involved, but I said I wasn't.
Let me ask you about another one you have your name on.
The truth has to matter at some point.
Yeah, it does matter. We just don't hear much of it from you. But let me ask you about another matter you have your name on. I don't think you can deny responsibility here, and that is the IRS settlement agreement. So you put your name on this. That absolves the President of tax liabilities in the past. The President was convicted in the case you represented him in of falsifying business records in part for tax purposes. Does this settlement not absolve the President of any liability for tax crimes associated with what he's already been convicted of?
That's not what he was convicted of. It not having to do with
tax
purposes.
I'm happy to read the statement of facts. The participants took steps that mischaracterized for tax purposes the true nature of the payments made in furtherance of the scheme. So you know, Mr. Blanche.
The participant there was not the President. It was somebody else.
Well, if the President is conspiring with others to falsify business records to help them cheat on taxes, he is also exposed to liability. You know that as well as I do.
He can't be audited for that.
And of course he can be. Of course he can be. And he can be prosecuted for it. But the agreement you signed on behalf of your former client, on behalf of your current client, in a staggering example of self-dealing, prohibits that. Let me ask you this. Does this tax agreement, this addendum you signed, also hold him harmless from any audit or tax liability with respect to the billions in crypto money he made in his first year as president?
It's not forward-looking. So to the extent there are taxes filed by the President or his sons or the Trump Organization after the date of that agreement, there's no protection.
Well, but before that agreement. So any taxes...
he hasn't filed taxes yet for money he made last year, right? So
yes.
No.
So if he
no protection.
If he filed tax returns this year for money he earned last year, that his sons earned as World Liberty Financial, all those people earned and defrauded taxpayers on it, he faces no liability under this agreement you signed.
There's no evidence taxpayers were defrauded, and he
is
not protected.
There's evidence in this agreement that you've absolved him of any liability over.
No, I just said he's not absolved. So the question
So this agreement doesn't apply to a tax return filed last year or filed this year?
To tax returns filed after the date of the agreement? No,
No, before the agreement. A tax return filed in this calendar year before this agreement.
Before the agreement, it applies, not after.
Okay, so for a tax return filed this year for last year, for the billions he made, there's no tax liability even if he cheats on his taxes or his kids do or his business do. He is absolved of that further potential liability.
No.
Well, it's in the plain language of your agreement. Did you write this language?
While Blanche defended the settlement inside the committee room, the political story outside the hearing was moving in another direction. Republican Senator John Cornyn publicly questioned whether the agreement was truly finished, pointing out that key language creating the so-called anti-weaponization fund had never been formally withdrawn. That matters because Blanche repeatedly told senators the fund was effectively dead, while critics argued the legal agreement itself still remained on the books. Suddenly, this wasn't only a Democratic attack. It had become a bipartisan challenge to Blanche's confirmation.
have to use the facts, though,
Did
that
you-
he hasn't
did
filed
you-
taxes yet. So when he files taxes, there's no protection based upon this agreement.
Did you write this language?
Did I type it up myself?
Did you write this language?
No.
Well, you put your name to it.
I did.
So who wrote this?
I don't know the person that actually typed it. I don't know who it is.
Was
someone
it
within the Department
one
of
of the
Justice.
president's lawyers, or was it someone from the Justice Department or IRS?
This document would have been
Yes.
somebody within the Department of Justice.
Well, you have no idea who that is.
I don't know the name of the person that typed it up.
And did you debate with them the statute of limitations, which clearly would preclude the president's claim, this $10 billion lawsuit?
We had extensive discussions internally about the underlying litigation.
And did you reject the statute of limitations defense?
I'm not a judge. I don't reject
But
things.
you signed an agreement for the
There
U.S.
was discussion around
You
the
signed an
litigation.
agreement for the U.S. basically indicating that the Justice Department's position that the statute of limitations applies doesn't matter.
I did. That's not what I said. I didn't say
Well-
that anywhere.
Who rejected the 25 defenses the IRS had to this sham lawsuit? Who rejected them? Who said that these defenses we're not going to accept, we're just going to go with the president's agreement in the slush fund, this immunity?
There was a lot of discussion internally.
But you made the
about
decision.
case. What's the decision? What do you mean?
You
What
made the decision to not defend the IRS and the Justice Department. You made the decision instead to sign this slush fund agreement.
We made the
with
decision to settle the case, correct.
Yeah. And in doing that, you basically decided that you were going to be the lawyer for the president and the lawyer for the IRS and the Justice Department. As the court found in this
No.
case, there was no adversarial relationship.
Yes,
the
there
court found it was a sham. It was a collusive relationship. And what I don't understand, Todd Blanche, what happened to the Todd Blanche who was a prosecutor in the Southern District of New York? What happened to the prosecutor people had respect for? What happened to the prosecutor who once respected the rule of law? What happened to the prosecutor who said that there wouldn't be a whiff of political partisanship and then prosecutes the president's enemies over Seychelles cases, over making a video stating the plain law and Constitution? What happened to the Todd Blanche of the Southern District of New York that could convert him into you, someone willing to say the president has both the right and the duty to prosecute his political enemies? I cannot
never said
imagine
that.
the Todd Blanche of the old days would have ever done that. What happened to you, Todd Blanche? I'll tell you this. I think Robert Caro had it right when he said that power doesn't corrupt as much as it reveals. I suspect it has just revealed who you are.
Schiff's emotional closing came at the exact moment Blanche was already facing criticism on multiple fronts. Throughout today's 5-hour hearing, senators questioned him not only about his relationship with President Trump, but also about the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files, January 6th investigations, leak investigations, and the IRS settlement. By the time Schiff asked, "What happened to you?" that question had become much larger than one case. It had become a referendum on whether Blanche could convince senators he would lead the Justice Department independently.
And who you are is someone willing to sacrifice everything you once believed in for that title, for that position of Attorney General. And it is a sad story that we have seen from Trump appointee after appointee after appointee. We have seen people compromise themselves little by little and then a lot by a lot until they're sitting before this committee and trying to justify the unjustifiable. I yield back.
May I just briefly respond, Chairman?
Yes, you may.
Very briefly. So you asked me what happened to Todd Blanche. I am still here. I am the same exact person I was when I was a federal prosecutor in the SDNY, which is do the right thing and do everything you can to keep communities safe. So when I was a line prosecutor, when I was a supervisor, when I was the head of a division, my motivation and my goal was the same thing with the people who worked with me and worked for me, which is do the right thing, enforce the laws, and put bad guys in jail. And so you spend time talking about, I did not interrupt you. I did not interrupt you. A little courtesy would be appropriate. So when you ask me what has changed, okay, and you talk about a single document that I signed, okay, and somebody had to sign that document when the president sued, okay, so I tried to do the right thing. What I do every single day, and what the prosecutors in this country do every single day, and the nearly 100,000 indictments and informations that have been filed since January 20th, is exactly what everybody in this building should want the Department of Justice to do, which is to make our communities safer, enforce the laws, both civilly and criminally, and always do the right thing with integrity, which is exactly what I'm doing. So I am the same Todd Blanche I was when I was a federal prosecutor in the SDNY.
And even after Blanche declared that he remains the same prosecutor he has always been, the confirmation fight was far from over. By the end of today's hearing, several Republican senators still had not committed to supporting his nomination, keeping the outcome uncertain. With bipartisan scrutiny over the IRS settlement, continued questions about DOJ independence, and criticism from more than 1,200 former Justice Department employees, today's hearing may have been only the opening chapter in a confirmation battle that could shape the Justice Department for years to come. So let me give you everything you need to know, because what you just watched was only part of the story. Long before Senator Adam Schiff questioned Todd Blanche today, this confirmation hearing had already become one of the most closely watched Justice Department battles of the year. Blanche wasn't simply appearing before senators as another attorney general nominee. He was appearing as President Trump's former personal lawyer, the acting attorney general, and the official now defending some of the administration's most controversial legal decisions. That combination has made his confirmation uniquely contentious. The first major issue hanging over today's hearing wasn't even discussed at length in the opening minutes. It was the controversial IRS settlement negotiated while Blanche led the Justice Department. That agreement included a proposed $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund, which immediately drew criticism from both Democrats and Republicans. Critics argued the fund could become a vehicle for compensating people who claimed they had been unfairly targeted by previous federal investigations, while supporters argued it was intended to address alleged government misconduct. Facing bipartisan backlash, the Justice Department later said it would not move forward with the fund. But that didn't end the controversy. During today's hearing, Blanche repeatedly told senators that the fund was effectively dead. However, Republican Senator John Cornyn challenged him on a key legal point. Cornyn argued that the original settlement agreement had never been formally terminated and questioned whether President Trump could still attempt to enforce parts of it in the future. That exchange is important because it showed skepticism wasn't coming only from Democrats. Even Republicans on the Judiciary Committee wanted stronger legal assurances that the agreement could not simply be revived later. That bipartisan scrutiny helps explain why Senator Schiff focused so heavily on conflicts of interest. Throughout today's hearing, Schiff argued that Blanche's previous role as Trump's personal attorney created continuing ethical concerns whenever Justice Department decisions touched matters involving the president. Blanche rejected that argument, insisting he followed Department of Justice ethics guidance, recused himself whenever required, and remained committed to enforcing the law fairly. He also rejected suggestions that he had become a political advocate rather than an independent prosecutor, telling senators he is the same exact person he was during his years as a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York. The hearing also expanded well beyond the IRS settlement. Senators questioned Blanche about the Justice Department's handling of the Epstein files, one of the most politically sensitive issues facing the department this year. Blanche acknowledged mistakes in how portions of those records were released, and said the department would continue pursuing any credible criminal evidence that emerged. That issue became another test of whether senators believed DOJ leadership had exercised appropriate judgment during a highly publicized investigation. Another major development that shaped today's hearing came from outside Congress. More than 1,200 former Justice Department employees publicly urged the Senate to reject Blanche's nomination. Their letter argued that recent personnel decisions and management changes had undermined the department's independence and effectiveness. Blanche's supporters counter that he has focused on restoring law enforcement priorities and reducing political influence inside the department. But regardless of which view ultimately prevails, the opposition from so many former DOJ officials became a significant part of the confirmation debate before today's hearing even began. One of the most striking moments during today's hearing came near the end, when Senator Schiff stopped discussing individual legal documents and instead asked a personal question: "What happened to you?" It wasn't really about one lawsuit or one settlement. It was about whether senators believed Blanche had changed from the federal prosecutor he once was into someone whose loyalty to President Trump now outweighed his obligation to the Justice Department. Blanche answered directly. He rejected that characterization, insisting his mission has never changed: enforce the law, protect communities, and act with integrity. Whether senators accepted that answer remains the central question in this confirmation process. And that's why today's hearing matters far beyond one political exchange. The Attorney General oversees the nation's most powerful law enforcement agency. Every administration promises that justice will be applied fairly and independently. Every Senate confirmation hearing tests whether the nominee can convince lawmakers and the public that those promises will be kept. Today's hearing showed that Todd Blanche still faces significant questions from both parties about ethics, DOJ independence, the IRS settlement, and several high-profile Justice Department decisions. The committee's vote will determine whether his nomination advances, but the broader debate over how independent the Justice Department should remain under any administration is almost certain to continue long after today's hearing concludes.